Okay, so I wanted to talk today about the depletion of a common pool resource. And I had us do this exercise on Monday where individuals could catch whales out of the ocean. Once you caught the whale, you got some points for it. That was your goal, was to get as many points as you can. And the more whales you caught, the more points you got. So you might say, why not just get as many as you can every round? The people who played, why not just, why didn't you just choose the maximum amount every round? You didn't. Why not? Anybody want to respond to this? I call on you, people. Here's what I will do. I will share the screen on which we played this game. Oh, maybe I won't. Here we go. Here's the whaling game. And actually that was the overall, but here's the whaling game. So you started out in 1860. There were 100 whales in each of your oceans. It started off with 100 in the Pacific and 100 in the Atlantic. And these 5 whaling companies, Robert, Tina, Nick, Myra, and Daniel, had to decide how many whales to catch. And the maximum was 10. And I just explained how you had this economic incentive to catch as many whales as you could, because you're going to get points based on the whales you caught. Well, only one person the first year, and that was Daniel, chose to catch the maximum, which was 10. Everyone else chose something less. And I'm wondering, can we just have a discussion now? I know it's the day after an election, and some of us are weary from all of it, myself included. But maybe we can make it light, good natured, good spirited. What's the word? Where it's like distract ourselves a little bit from the realities of the world. Why not? Why would somebody not just get all 10 whales?
Well, I didn't because
Yeah, Tina, thank you.
I was thinking about other people,
Okay.
and I guess I didn't really want to take away from their whales.
Okay, so one reason is that you didn't want to be too selfish and get all the whales for yourself. That's okay. That's one reason. And is there any other reason to not go full on catch all the whales you can? It has to do. Go ahead.
I guess like the depletion of the whale supply.
And how about this idea of whether they're renewable, whether they can reproduce? I built it in to this simulation that whales increase 20% every decade. Okay, so however many whales were left over after you took them, that number increased by 20% in the next decade. You can kind of see that here in this 1.2. I took that number and I multiplied it by 1.2. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh well, maybe I can. Anyways, so that's another reason, right, Tina? You gave me one reason, which is I don't want to be the one who gets all the whales while nobody else does. That's one reason. But there's another reason, which I think is actually more important for economics, or if this were behavioral economics, actually, I'd be very interested in what you said, which is you don't care just about your own payoff, but you care about other people's payoff too, and you have this idea of what's fair, and you don't want to do something which is seen as unfair. That makes sense. But there's another economic reason not to get all the whales right at first, because if you don't, like let's say Daniel, if he, instead of 10 he had gotten 2, I'm going to put that in now, 2. Look what happens. The whale supply is higher in 87, in 1870, it went up. What if everyone had just gotten 2? This is a hypothetical here. Look how the whale stock actually grows, because it increases by 20% every year. It's like it sort of becomes harmonious with nature. And yes, you are taking away some whales from this supply, but you're also letting the stock be healthy enough. And not picking 10 whales right away, you are able to make your future behavior less predictable to competition whalers, competing whalers. Okay, Kevin, maybe that's another reason. Maybe that's a third reason. And I guess I agree because you're playing a game. Maybe you want to be unpredictable in some way. But I also don't think that is the main economic reason to um, to sort of restrain yourself. Like you look and you see this whale full of ocean full of whales, and you think, oh, the huge catch is mine. I'm going to get it all, take it all. You may think that in the short run, but in the long run, you're just hurting yourself because by decreasing the population, they're not able to reproduce, and uh, it's about sustainability. That's the word. Wouldn't you guys agree? This is a question of sustainability. Well, this is an economics class. You might say, this is an economics class. This isn't about environmental stuff. Why are you talking to me about environmental sustainability? That has nothing to do with economics. Economics is about profit. You see the resource, you use the resource, you profit from the resource. And I would say to you, that's very short-sighted of you. That's not what economics is about. You only took the introductory class of economics. You didn't take the next class. The next class is about sustainability, or one of them is environmental economics. Here's what I'm saying. You don't just, if these guys had done this, had really reduced their supply, what if they'd gone all the way to zero? Let me just take a look at that. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Look at how much the stock of whales, it would go from 100 to 120, and then they could have caught this amount and it would still be over 100. It would still be over 100. It wouldn't even dip over 100 until the year 1900. That's how many whales there would be in the ocean, in the Pacific Ocean, if they had this would be, this would be called a moratorium. If they had issued a moratorium on whale catching in 1860, then this ocean, the ocean that did that, the Pacific Ocean, do you think they would have gotten more points or fewer points than the Atlantic Ocean if they had issued a 1-decade moratorium on whale harvesting, catching, or fishing? I don't know what you call it. Whaling. The verb is whaling. What do you think? Would this sort of moratorium had made sense? Do you guys know this word? Moratorium. A moratorium is when you say, I'm not saying you can never do this thing, you just can't do it for a certain amount of time. It's like a temporary ban. Robert said he tried to make it sustainable, but others were not feeling cooperative. Yeah, I feel you, Robert, because I remember what you were saying about this. Like, hey guys, let's all try to keep it low, and it just didn't work. That's the thing about a moratorium. It has to be mutually agreed upon. Like if some people like Daniel, because he did say 10, if Daniel's like, you know what, I don't care about this moratorium, I'm going to do 10, that sort of almost defeats the purpose. I mean, it's probably still better than not having the moratorium, but if two people say, now I'm going to do 10, look at that. Now the whale stocks goes all the way down to 55. What if a third person does it? Look, now by 1900, it's down to 33. What about a fourth? Look, then by 1900, it's down to 14. And here, if everyone had just said, I don't trust anybody, I'm going to get all the whales I possibly can, then the stock of whales would actually run out before the end of the game. Before the game ends, you would have no more whales left in your ocean, all because of what you did there in that first turn in 1860. Just like real life, exactly, Colin. The reason I did this exercise is because there really was a commercial whaling industry that existed for all of these years. And I want to talk about what actually happened to the whaling industry. Maybe you know. Maybe you know what happened. But especially if you've seen the South Park episode about Japan and the whaling industry, you guys probably don't even know what South Park is. You're the next generation. You're not from my generation. Okay. You're closer in age to my kids than you are to me. That's weird. Anyways. let's talk about the depletion of a common pool resource and the economics behind it. Now I want to forget about the feelings, like, oh, how I feel about this. That's behavioral stuff. I want to just talk about the economics of it. Like, what if your goal was truly just to get as many points as you could here in this game? What do you think would be the best thing to do? Like, let's say you were in control. Robert, let's say, Robert, you were in control of everybody. You were like a dictator. You could tell them what to do and they would do it. What would you have them do? Let's just look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's look at these 5 decades. How high do you think we could get everyone's scores? You know what I should have done? I'm sorry. I want to save this. I'm going to Control Z all that I've done. Yeah. Okay. No. Back. Sorry. Okay, I think I'm good. Here's what I'm saying. I want to save this for the future. Duplicate. And then copy of whaling. Okay, so in this copy of whaling, we can mess with it. In fact, let's just delete everything. Delete. Okay. I want 3 points every time, or 4, whichever keeps the supply constant. Okay, Robert, thank you. Robert gave me an answer. Can somebody else also say whether you agree with Robert or come up with an idea of your own? Sorry, I know this is we're all feeling a little election hangover right now. Okay, thanks, Daniel and Shriyasi. You agree with Daniel that the best thing you can do is do 3 every time. That's what you're saying? Let's try that. Let's try that. You know, it's actually a very good idea, but I've created so look at that. If you do 3 every time, you get 15. You think that's good? You think that's the best you could do? What happened in real life? Okay, remember, this is the copy. This is like our stuff we can play with. What actually happened was actually people were getting in the 20s and 30s. In the Atlantic, they got even up to 40. Kevin got 40 points. So I don't know. Do you really think that's the best you could do? 3 every time? Not to the whales. Oh, good point, Colin. So I'm sorry, but oh, I didn't put a time limit in. That's right. If there was no time limit, maybe you're right. This would go on forever. You would get 3 forever, and that would probably be the best. But, okay, that's a great point. The whole game was sort of created by me, and the incentives were created by me, and I did have to have a time limit because, I mean, I didn't say how many years it would go or decades, but the class was going to end at 10:50. So I did have to have some either explicit, it was actually an implied time limit that couldn't go on forever. So now let's think about the game a little bit differently then. What would you do here? What about the last round? Would you only get 3 if you knew it was the last round? No, you would get 10, wouldn't you? I'll put that in for you. 10. Okay, now everyone's getting 20. But wait a second. Could you do even better than that? What if everyone got 10 in 1890? And we're still good, aren't we? Now look, everyone's getting 29. And we wouldn't have wasted time all messaging you our points. That's true. Could we do even better than that? What if you all got 10 in 1880? Okay, so now we're getting to the point where here's what I'm going to do. This equals the last round divided by 5. So let's say you just split the number of whales even. Oops. Sorry about that. Equals, I need the $ here. You guys know about the $? It's a nice way to use fill accurately. Okay. Now look, everyone's getting 29. Everyone's getting 29 in this world. Can we do better than that? As opposed to the real life where, actually, take a look. Some people are doing pretty well here. Kevin got 40. Myron got 30. Daniel got 32. So we're still not doing as well. What's going on? 29 is pretty good, but can we do better? What about a moratorium? And then, okay, now look what happened with that moratorium. You see how the totals went up? Totals went up to 32.8. Why? Because there were more whales there at the end that you got the last round. What if it was a two-term moratorium? Actually, I don't think that would help, would it? There. I don't know. This is roughly the best you could do, I think. Everyone getting 33. So actually, you guys did pretty well before. I don't understand this. How did Kevin get 40? What if I made a mistake somewhere? Kevin, you did much better than someone would predict. Okay. Anyways, I think I made this point here where if your goal, let's say you don't care about whales at all, like you're totally fine with making whales extinct. This would be the least uh, environmentally conscious person out there. Somebody who hates whales, wants to kill them all, but still makes money off of the whales. Even that sort of a person would want to be thinking about the future, about these resources, and say, okay, well, let's have a moratorium now, so that this whale supply can increase a little bit. There's the point of this is that there is a dynamic property. There's an incentive to care about the future that isn't just about feelings. It's about profit. I will make more profit if I use this resource sustainably than if I don't. And maybe, of course, Robert was right when he said everyone get approximately three whales per year, per decade. That would be true in terms of making it sustainable indefinitely into the future, as far as you wanted to go. I made this game that had a definite end, and that's why at the end you see everyone getting 10 whales, and it makes them better off. But let's almost forget about that. That was just because of the game. In real life, I would say people do have some concern about themselves, their whole lifetime, maybe their children's lifetime or their grandchildren's lifetime. You could think about this extending really, really far into the future. Okay, so let's go to some of my slides. And say what this is. It is a common pool resources. I want to talk about those. I want to talk about externalities. I do think I want to have a quiz on Friday. So today I want to help you prepare for that quiz by talking exactly about this issue of common pool resources in a sort of mathematical way. So, you can answer simple math questions about the common pool resource. What is a common pool resource? It's something valuable that everyone has access to. You can't stop people from using it. It wouldn't be common pool if you could stop people from using it. Or if you can, you might not. You might not stop people from using it. So like maybe the default is that they have access to it. For example, public grazing grounds for livestock. A lot of ranchers have livestock that isn't going to grow up to be bigger and more valuable livestock unless they have grounds on which they can graze. And if there's some public grounds, in other words, anyone can send their livestock to those grounds, what happens? They get overgrazed and the common pool resource is depleted. Same thing with, like, say, an irrigation system or public parks or fisheries. These could be things that everyone has access to, and there could be an issue with overuse, having it being depleted. So this is what economists are interested in. What happens when the common pool resource is depleted by overuse? What? Are you saying something? No. You just happen to be unmuted for a second. Okay. If you do have a question, please let me know or comment. So fishing grounds are an excellent example of a common pool resource, because the more you fish, then the less is available for other fishermen. And there's an issue of not just whether you should deplete it, but whether you're over depleting it. If you're using it too fast, this makes it mathematically even a more interesting case. The stock of the resource has a natural rate of growth, like fishing. The fish can reproduce, or the whales in our example, and there's a healthy rate. You can catch the fish at a sustainable rate, and they will continue to grow just fine. But if you catch them too much, too fast, the whole fishing stock can sort of disappear. This is happening in the real world with not so much with small fish, but with large fish. Uh, there's certain species of large fish that essentially are going to become unavailable commercially because they've been overfished for years. Like swordfish, I think is an example. A lot of big fish. They've been caught at such a high rate that they're not going to ever recover. Some people predict, which is very sad. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll be extinct, but it means they're going to be so rare that nobody catches them. Nobody's able to find them and catch them. Okay. What happens to valuable common pool resources? The incentive is to get as much as you can. This is what private private industry does, what business does. If you have a resource that makes you money, you get it. You guys ever seen the Lorax? This always makes me think of the Lorax. In the story of the Lorax, there is a guy called the Onceler who finds these trees called truffula trees, and he just thinks of a way to make money off of them called a thneed. And the Onceler cuts down all of the truffula trees, like literally every single one, to make these thneeds. And then the forest becomes worthless. And of course, all the natural, the animals who live there have to go find somewhere else. They actually have a dig on Lake Erie, on Cleveland, Ohio, which is not necessarily where I'm from. It's where I went to undergrad. But anyways, the point of the Lorax is to make it clear to children that this is a problem. What I'm talking about right now of the over depletion of a resource that's available to everyone. There were no laws in the Lorax about cutting down the truffula trees. There was no government that said, these truffula trees belong to these people, and you do not have the right to cut them down. In the world of the Lorax, there was no government that to speak of, and the Onceler simply saw them as a resource that he could use. I just want you guys to know, I'm not saying industry is bad. I'm not even saying capitalism is bad. I don't know. This is an aside. I feel like talking a little bit right now, as I might seem like somebody who's pretty liberal, pretty progressive, somebody who's upset that the election is so close because there's a particular candidate I wanted to win, and we still don't know if that candidate is going to win. But as an economist, I realize that there is something to be said about private enterprise and a free market's ability to raise people out of poverty. And it's actually about who has the control of the means of production. And a decentralized economy is far superior, is far more efficient, at least, than a centralized, like socialist or communist type of government/economy. And therefore, I'm not saying that all industries are bad if they see a resource and they want to use it to produce something. I'm not saying that. In fact, that's what has brought prosperity to billions, not millions, but billions of people across the world. It's this ability to create economic production given resources that they have available. Okay, but what I'm talking about now is the over depletion. And why does it happen? Why is it over depletion? It's because each person isn't thinking about anybody else but themselves. And that is a problem, because the right amount of, even the Onceler, if you know the story in the Lorax, even the Onceler was pretty stupid. just based on his own incentives. If he wasn't thinking about other people, but he should have at least been thinking about himself and trying to decide how many truffula trees do I want to cut down and how many do I want to plant for the future. He was an idiot. He cut them all down. There were no truffula trees left. So he put himself out of business. But 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 even if he were smart and he were trying to think about how many trees can I cut down just to make as much money as I can now and in the future, if a second person comes in, not the Onceler, but a rival, and they start cutting down the trees to make money, but they're also thinking about the future. And then a third person comes in to try to cut down the trees. And then fourth and a fifth, the more people that are using this resource, even if they are thinking about the future, thinking about, wait, I want to leave some of the trees for the future. Even if they're thinking about that, they're going to take too many. And that's called the tragedy of the commons. Meaning that even if people are totally rational and totally forward thinking means I can optimize not just my profits now, but my profits later. I'm thinking about the future and I'm planning for the future. If you get enough people using the common pool resource, they will overuse it and it will disappear, or it will be inefficient. That's what this slide's about. What happens to the valuable resource if there's no government regulation, there's no organization to say what you have to do? It's going to be over depleted. Does everyone see that? Okay. Here's a case study: commercial whaling. It's a very old, profitable industry. Think about Moby Dick as this novel that it grew to a massive scale in the early 1900s. Lots and lots of whalers. 50,000 whales were killed each year. Can you imagine that in our oceans? If you're like, yeah, we killed 50,000 whales just this year alone. Crazy. There was a sharp decline in whale population. It's like, remember how in 1900 that actually happened in our study? People are like, let's just do it. Let's kill them all. Of course, it was because the class period was about to end. But in real life, something kind of similar happened. So you got this sharp decline in the whale population. What happened after that? You had this international commission. This is kind of like what Robert was trying to do, wasn't he? Robert was trying to say, hey, everybody, even Daniel was trying to do it. He was unsuccessful. But you have this incentive to organize. Organization is a really, really smart thing to do when you have this common pool resource. If you're unorganized, you know what's going to happen. You're going to take all the whales. The whaling industry will disappear because you've gone too many. So this whaling commission was formed in an international way to try to solve that problem, to try to create some organization that would be efficient. And by 1980, the number of whales decreased to 10% of the earlier populations, because the whaling commission basically was trying to say how many you could catch. This basically put a cap on each country. The United States, Norway, Japan, all these countries had a bunch of whaling ships, and they said, here's how many you can catch. Well, it still wasn't good enough. The population was still going down, even with this commission. So what did they do? In 1982, they issued a moratorium, which means zero, right? Everyone in the world, your cap, the most whales you can catch is now zero. Why did they do that? It's because the population got to be so low that they were worried that they didn't actually care. They didn't actually care about the whales. They cared about their industry. That's what I want to stress now. This commission, this International Whaling Commission, this wasn't an environmental group that cared about the whales, because whales are mammals and they can sing, and they're actually a lot smarter than we realized at the time. This was like an industry-based commission. It was doing this to try to preserve the industry of whaling. Okay, that's a little of the economics behind it. That if left alone, people over deplete the resource. That's also called the tragedy of the commons. And one way to solve it is to organize, like a whaling commission, and reduce your consumption, or I'm sorry, reduce the depletion of this resource as much as you can to try to get more, to be more efficient, to use it, to let the stock regrow and to use it later. Does that make sense? You understand the problem. The problem is the tragedy of the commons, over depletion of a common pool resource based on everyone's incentives. And the solution, at least one solution here, is to form an organization, in this case it was the IWC, that tells everybody collectively, here's what we need to do. We need to drastically reduce or go to zero our use of this resource to try to make it more sustainable and more healthy. Okay, I want to talk now about, how much time do we have? 10:36. 14 minutes, and I really want to tell you stuff that I can ask you on the quiz, and I want to help you to be ready for the quiz on Friday. Okay, so here is something like I could ask you on the quiz. So let me, how can I force you to participate? I don't see any way to force you to participate. All you have to do is ignore me, and what can I do? All right. So let me just explain this example and try to entice you to listen and to care, because I think I'll ask you something similar on the quiz. I want to talk now about the tragedy of the commons, where we've already talked about the case where over time, you're talking about sustainability over time. Now I want to talk about something else, which is where there is no other time. There's only one time. This is a one-shot game. You might say, what does the tragedy of the commons have to do if it's not about if we're not talking about a length of time, then there's no tragedy. Wrong. There is a tragedy. And let's look at it through the context of this game. What if you have 8 ranchers, people who own some amount of a ranch? They can either buy a steer. A steer is like a cow, I think. It costs $100. They can have a steer, and they can have it graze on common lands. Okay? Buy one, for the purposes of this exercise, let's just say there's eight ranchers, all of them have this common lands, and all you can do is buy one steer and bring it on the lands and let it graze for a year, and then you will be able to sell the steer for a certain amount. But the amount you can sell it for depends on how many other steers are on the grazing lands, because this is an assumption in this example, that the more steer are on the grazing land, the less good grass is available to eat, the less big the animal becomes, and the less valuable it is. I'm sorry if anyone is vegetarian or vegan. This is a particularly gruesome example. Maybe I should change it to like pumpkins or something that can grow big, but not necessarily involved in the meat industry. Sorry. This is me. I might need to change my slides. Okay, so first question. What happens if all 8 ranchers, they're trying to make money, and it's a laissez-faire? It means there's no government intervention. Everyone's allowed to do whatever they want. What would the ranchers do? Remember, they have $100. They can either keep the $100 or they could buy a steer, and the steer becomes this valuable. There's 8 of them. What do you think would happen if they were just sort of left on their own? Any answers to this?
I have one idea. I think if so if a rancher buys a steer from the common from the common pool, right? And then he brings that steer, like, I guess, out of the pool and like to his own property. Does that steer like increase in value since it's not around other steers?
Yeah, I think actually you're making this more complicated than it needs to. Let me be as clear as I can. Each rancher has a choice, which is either to keep $100, get $100, or to buy a steer, which will be worth somewhere between 150 and 95. He doesn't know how much that steer will be worth, and it depends on the total number of steers purchased and allowed to graze. So it could be that he buys a steer, he's the only one who buys a steer, and it's worth $150. So of course that would be better. Or it could be that all 8 ranchers buy steers, and then the value of a steer is $95. In fact, then all 8 ranchers would be disappointed in their decision. They said they would have all thought to themselves, oops, I made the wrong decision. I should have just kept the $100 instead of buying the steer, which is now only worth 95. You understand the problem? So the economic problem here is for, on the rancher side, this, do I buy the steer or do I keep the $100? And what are they trying to do? They're trying to maximize their value. So the question is, what do you think would happen in, let's say, an equilibrium of this game where everyone on their own just decides what to do? Just tell me how many ranchers would buy steers. I'm going to ask you this on the quiz, so if you can't do it, that's bad, but maybe I'll tell you. So if you're paying attention, you'll do better on the quiz.
Is it 6?
Yeah, it's 6. This is not a hard problem. Thank you, Tina. Why is it 6?
Because the value of the steer is more than 100 still.
Yeah. So six ranchers will say it's worth it for me to buy a steer, but the 7th one is going to look at this table and say, actually, it's not worth it. I'm going to just keep my 100. So six ranchers get steer, and 2 don't. That's the answer to this question. If I ask on a quiz, how many ranchers would buy a steer if there's no government intervention? The answer is 6, because, well, you know, if the numbers change, of course your answer should change, but you're thinking individually, what would the rancher do? Do I want whatever the steer is worth, or do I just want to keep the 100? And it was Tina, I believe. I think Tina said it. Tina is right that, well, 6 would get it, because once the 6th steer is purchased, it's worth 102. That's better than 100. If a rancher was thinking about, another rancher was thinking about getting a steer, that would make them the 7th, then it wouldn't be worth it. So that's why the answer is 6. Okay, how about the next bullet point? What is the socially optimal or efficient number of steers to be grazing on this land? Remember, this is a common land. This is just like, you know, imagine a town, and there's all this common land that cows can graze on. How many? This is a harder problem. This is a harder problem. But I want you to think about it. Do I have time? Oh. I can ask you guys to do a little bit of math, can't I? You're college students. You can do it. I believe in you. You can do this math. The math I'm asking you right now, what's the socially optimal amount of steers to buy? Somebody have a chat or something? I'm down for it. Okay, Kevin, answer it. When you say you're down for it, are you talking about answering this problem?
I'm trying to take a crack at it. I'm really not sure. Like, I'm thinking.
I mean, get a pencil and paper. Get a pencil.
So socially optimal would mean that every single one of them would get a steer, right?
No. Did you say every single one would get a steer? No.
Would that be socially optimal?
No, because think about how much value there would be. It would be 8 times 95. That would be the total value. Could they do better than that? Of course. If they just do nothing, they get $800 worth of value. Think of this question as, what's the way to maximize the value of these ranchers? That includes their initial 100. Either, you know, this economic choice between keeping the 100 or buying a steer, factor that in, and then say, what's the way to maximize the total value?
So it would be that 6 of them buy a steer, and then 2 of them don't. They save their money.
That's not it. Is that Kevin again?
No.
Who's talking?
That's not it.
Kevin?
Yes.
Thank you for
Kevin. This is Kevin. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for giving an answer, but I think that's not right. And you know why? Each rancher is only making $2 of profit, right? You have 6 ranchers that are making a $2 surplus, a trade surplus, if you want to think of it that way. And the other, 6 times 2 is how much surpluses you're getting. You're basically increasing the value by 12. I think you could do better than that. I think you could do better than increasing the value, the total value by 12. How? What if you just had one rancher buy a steer and all the other 7 don't? Just one rancher buy a steer. How much increase in value will there be? The answer is 50, right? 50 is better than 12. So Kevin, your proposal was that you have 6 ranchers buy a steer. Each rancher generates $2 of surplus. 6 times 2 is 12. That's only $12 of surplus generated. Whereas if you just had one rancher, they would generate $50 of surplus, which is better than 12. And am I saying that one steer is the right answer? No. I want us to figure out what the right answer is. I'm not letting you go until you do it. No, I'm just kidding. I can't stop you from going. If you want to leave, you can leave. But this will help you on the quiz, I promise. Robert says 3. Robert says 3. Well, okay, Robert, can you just sort of walk us through? How did you get that? 30 times 3 equals 90. Very good. 90 is the largest surplus. Oh, wow, you guys did this together, Robert and Kevin. You're right. Do you guys see why they're right? Everybody else, why not 4? 4 would give you 15 times 4, which is 60. That's not right, right? How about 2? That would give you 40 times 2, that's 80. That's not it either. It's 3. Robert and Kevin get an A, everyone else gets Fs. Just kidding. But on the quiz on Friday, I might ask you this. I might ask you something just like this. What's the point of this question? Why did I concoct this example? It's to show you very, very clearly, I hope, how government intervention is not only efficient, but it's a Pareto improvement. You remember what Pareto improvement means. It means everyone, literally everyone is better off. And here's my point. This is what makes me not a libertarian, is to be aware of the fact that does anybody want, I'm about to give you the conclusion here. Does anyone want to say it? Maybe you've made the conclusion yourself. Does anybody know the conclusion? Or should I just tell you? We're running low on time. The point of this
is that there needs to be
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I can't understand you, Kevin. I apologize. We're low on time. I'm just going to tell you. The government can say
we can't have a complete laissez.
I'm sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, you're not Kevin. Who are you? No. You're breaking up. Let me just tell you, the government can say we will issue permits. We will issue 3 permits. Why 3? Why 3 permits? Because that's the socially optimal number of permits. And we say to all of the ranchers, we're going to sell these permits. We're going to sell these permits to 3 of you, and we're going to take those profits that we make from selling the permits and spread the wealth to all of us, to all 8 of you. If you do this, then literally every rancher, all 8 people, are better off than if they don't do this. Because remember the laissez-faire option? The laissez-faire is if you do nothing, what happens? I'm going to ask you this. If you do nothing, what happens? The answer is 6 of the ranchers buy steers, and they all make 100, and they have 102, and the other 2 have 100. So the surplus that's generated is either 2 or 0. And what I'm saying is, if there's a government that says we're going to sell 3 permits, I don't even care what they sell it for. I mean, you sell it for an amount that's in between what it's worth and 0. Maybe split the difference. Because actually, if there's 3 permits, each permit would be worth 30, wouldn't it? You guys see that? If there were three permits, that means each permit is worth $30. You could sell it for half that, say 15, right? You sell permits for half what they're worth. That's $15, and you generate $45 worth of like permit money, and you can distribute that to the five ranchers who didn't buy the permits. It's 45 divided by 5. That's actually $9. So what happens if you issue 3 permits? The people who didn't buy the permits will get the $9 from the revenue from the permit revenue, and they'll end up with a value of 109. What about the 3 ranchers who did buy the permits? Well, it's worth 30 and they had to pay 15 for the permit, but they still benefit by the amount of 15. So they get a value of, let's say, 115. Do you see what happened? If you have these permits, then every single rancher either makes 109 or $115. Whereas if you don't have the permits, all the ranchers either make 100 or 102. That's a Pareto improvement, right? Everybody's making more money with these permits. You may think, if you didn't understand the economics of this, you may think governments are always bad because they restrict your choices. They tell you what you can or can't do, or they fine you. They make you pay these permits that you shouldn't have to pay. I think, I hate to get political here, but there was this dispute in Oregon a few years ago about ranchers who were just furious about having to pay permits to graze on government land. They thought they had the right to graze, and no government ever should be able to tell them they can't. They don't understand this economic principle that actually it could be efficient. It could be better for everybody to let the government come in and control how a common pool resource is used. And it's not that the government is some kind of genius that regular people can't figure it out. It's not that. It's that if there's no right, if there's no property rights, if it's truly a commons and anyone can use it, it will get overused. As in this example of the steers, having 6 steers on this grounds, it overuses it, and the steers don't get big and fat and valuable. Of course, let's forget about the implications in the meat industry. The point is efficiency. We're economists. We want efficiency. This is the case for government intervention because the socially optimal level of use of this common pool resource, it will not occur on its own because of the tragedy of the commons. The only way to make it happen, the only way to make that socially optimal usage occur is to intervene with something, with either permits or some other type of taxes. You could use it with taxes too. What if you taxed people for using the commons? That would work too. You could do that too. There are other ways to do it, but the takeaway from this is, I think I talk about it on the next slide, but I think I'm out of time. Oh, I said 16 for each. It doesn't matter if it's 15 or 16, whatever. So this is the answer. Right? The conclusion: property rights, and by property rights I mean and permitting, either property rights or permitting rights. Those are the same thing. You have the right to use it or you don't. Can solve, and by solve I mean it can restore the efficiency that doesn't exist with the tragedy of the commons, but it can exist with government intervention. Okay? Do you guys have any questions about this result here, the stuff I have on the screen right now? The stuff I had before and the stuff I have now. Like, this is the problem. The problem is, here's 2 questions. What would happen if they're on their own? And what would socially optimal or efficient? And there's a third question is, how could the government intervene to make it more efficient? In fact, to make it a Pareto improvement. And the answer is on this page. And this is on Blackboard if you want to go back and look at it. You guys have any questions? I think I'm over my time. I'm sorry about that. I'm going to stop sharing. Ooh, I'm way over my time. Apologize. Let's have a quiz on this and the previous lecture. Oh, what was it? Oh, I'm sorry, I forget what we talked about before this. Minimum wage? No. Oh, healthcare. Gosh. Okay, so this is going to be a big quiz. This is going to be a quiz about insurance markets, healthcare, adverse selection, and tragedy of the commons. I will send you a note to remind you about this stuff. Hopefully we'll learn more about the election on Friday when I see you again on Friday. You guys have any questions? I promise I will send an announcement about the quiz. Okay? Not a lot of talking.
I appreciate you, Professor. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I'll see you Friday then.
Thank you.
All right. Good luck.